So, today's podcast is going to be about something that I realized that came to mind that I thought would be a great topic for the podcast today. And it is pretty much about how entrepreneurs, business people who are successful, um, how they would think about other people that aren't entrepreneurs and doing business stuff, and just the thought that entrepreneurs would think that people are lazy, or they don't get off their butt to do this and that, and they want to make it seem like people have no desire to be successful or make a business. And what they don't realize is, and this is what I thought was worth talking about for the podcast, what they don't realize is that their mind is different than other people, and that they may not realize it, that subconsciously they are not aware that they are a little more mentally advanced than other people. Because if you ever think about, some entrepreneurs that are doing big things, and they have businesses, and maybe they have multiple businesses, and they're doing this and that, they're doing a lot of stuff. And they're doing a lot of stuff that is actually complicated. And so if you think about that person that's doing that and other people that are not doing that, there's just an obvious difference right there, that the other person, business person over here, making all this happen, they clearly have a different mind. Their mind is almost like crack. Their energy in their mind and how they're doing things and thinking about things is actually more different than others. And so not everyone has that mental capability to be that quick. And so for you to tell someone, oh, you could just start today and, not procrastinate and just focus. And, you give all these general tips. You could say all these things, but they are not you. And so, other people may not have that mental capability at the time to do what you're doing. Maybe that person has always been interested in certain things, and maybe who knows what how they were financially, but then one thing led to another, and they've always been interested in this, they've always been involved in that, they're always doing some sort of program, they're always participating, and that takes someone that is very social and very energetic, and they're almost like a machine that is just going and going and going, and to them, they're probably not stressing out about things. They're actually looking forward to it. Maybe they're nervous, but they're not as nervous. And so they're able to do these public things, and, if they're going to do public speaking, or, just meeting with clients and do stuff like that, that is a completely different mindset. And there can be people that are not like that. They're not always looking to be in a public social setting. and speaking amongst other people and doing these group things. And so, for someone to start something right now that they're passionate about and take this lane of entrepreneurship, if they were to start right now, most likely, you're just gonna, either way, you're gonna like start going on YouTube, watch dozens of videos. That's one thing you have to do. So you have to learn about this stuff. And then you have to Google different resources and look into what each thing offers. And there's a learning curve to even learning about what the resources offer, because you have to know if it matters. And so there's that you have to deal with. And then, there's also the extra thinking you're going to do about the timing and how much money you're going to do. You have to think about that. And then after learning all that and knowing what it takes, at that point, you still have to decide if you are determined to do it. You still have to do a check-in and see if you are still as interested and excited about it from the time you started and did all this research and all this work to find out if it even matters. You have to come to that point after doing all that process and learning so much about it, you have to come to that time to be like, well, do I want to do this? And if you don't want to do this, then you did all that just to realize you don't want to do it. But if you want to push further, then all that you did was just a process, a step one. Now step two would be leveling up to actually do the stuff, like actually going with a program finally. And you're putting the money in and you have all this thing and you're actually making it happen. To be someone that is going to do that right now, just because some entrepreneur that's successful is saying all these things about what you can do and not procrastinate and just giving general tips, even so, that person would have to be disciplined, and they have to have their mind wired and wrapped around entering this lane of doing all this stuff, because all that stuff is technical. All that stuff, you have to be sharp and you have to be focusing. And so that person is not that entrepreneur. And so you have to realize, like I said, not everyone has that mental capability to be quick. It doesn't even seem realistic, where someone hears someone say something and then within 24 hours, they already have a brand and they made a website and they're already selling stuff. I don't think it works that way, especially if you've never been about entrepreneurship and you know nothing about it. It doesn't even make sense to go about it like that. And so, it almost gets a little ignorant to think that people don't have it in them to do these certain things and take these kinds of risks to start a business, because not everyone is wired like that. Just like not everyone is wired to like run for mayor or governor. Not everyone is wired or that kind of person to join the army and stuff like that. And so everyone is different. And so if you are someone that is energetic and your mind is just like doing things easily on the fly, then you have a little bit more of an advantage. a natural advantage over others because of the way you're very interested in the way you are. And so other people are just going to be a little behind. And if they're going to somehow start getting to that level of doing all these kinds of things, they're going to be struggling a little bit. You know, they're going to have to break out of their shell now. They're going to have to, you know, think a little differently. You know, who knows what they've been through their life. But now they're going to have to adjust things. And so to get into that lane of being this person that is an entrepreneur and moving things here and there, making it happen, there is a learning curve that people don't seem to realize, especially from the entrepreneurs themselves that are successful. I mean, you know, if there's an entrepreneur right now that's making multi-million dollars, you know, with all these businesses and seminars and all these things, and they're coaching people about, you know, what they could do and all this, they don't realize that people are not mentally wired to do that, because they can attend these seminars, they can get all these coaching and all this stuff, but that person is there because they're not mentally wired. And so they're trying to see if they can somehow be mentally wired, if they could somehow earn that mental capability to not procrastinate and not be shy and not be nervous, and you're a quick thinker and you're doing things a lot in 24 hours. And it's not really like that. You know, everyone's wired differently. And so that's something you have to think about, especially when you think that, you know, you have nothing going on and you would like to have something, but you don't know what to do. You have to think about it like that. You know, these people that are successful with their thing and moving quickly, they just have a different mindset, and they've had a different background, obviously. And so, you know, those combinations of things put together, and just the person themselves, that is what makes the person that you see on the other end. And it's not an illusion. It's just something that you may not realize. It's not necessarily that they're smarter either. It's just that, okay, just like someone in school could know math more quickly and do it all better. It's not that they're smarter. It's just that mentally they're not finding this difficult. And so they're able to grasp everything. And when it comes to doing these things, they're more automatic to do it. And so the people that aren't like that, they're going to be struggling. They're the ones that are going to be wondering more about how things work and how is this possible, and everything's going to feel like it doesn't make sense. But for others, it's just going to make sense, and they're going to fly through it. And so, obviously, if you're going to be flying through things like that, that person could definitely expect to get a full free tuition scholarship for, you know, the whole 4 years in masters. And it's only because of that. And so to them, that's a natural advantage. You know, subconsciously, they don't realize that. You know, how are you going to realize that for yourself and say, well, I guess I'm so smart and I do all this. But yeah. So that person that's flying through all these things and not struggling, that's going to be their lane to succeed. That, and they may not realize that because they're flying through things, and they're not thinking about it like the other person that's struggling. They're not thinking about it like, because the other person that is struggling with that math, they're just looking at the other person and thinking, wow, they're clearly going to get the full tuition, scholarship. You're going to think they're going to fly through college. And that's what you're going to think of them. But to them, they're just thinking, well, I finished that. Now I'm on to the next thing. I finished that. And so, when they do other harder things, harder math, they're going to be flying through it. And then they're going to be understanding rocket science. And they're going to be understanding, other things that require different kinds of math and numbers. And so for them, that's how you get people working in NASA. It only makes sense. I mean, it's not just anyone that works at NASA. It's just that person, they're finding these things that other people find hard very easy. They understand it, and maybe they're also like passionate about stuff, and they have a very technically open mind. They have some unlocked doors in their mind that makes it easy for them to do these things. And so I guess the question is now, how much is the lack of success and being an entrepreneur is due to the fact that people are lazy and procrastinate? Well, that can also be a factor. It's a reality, but it's not the only thing. If you've never, think about it like this. I mean, there's a good portion of your life where you're in school, and then when you graduate high school, you're probably 18 or 19. Okay. So you still have a young brain. And so 18 or 19 till 30, you probably, your brain is not, you can't be at that mature, level yet. I mean, you're going to be chilling with friends, you're going to be drinking, you're going to have your period, your natural period growing up, like everyone does and has, where you're just growing up, you turn 21, you're in your early 20s, and, you're drinking, you're chilling, and then you start, wrapping up and shaping up a little down the line. And so, yeah, obviously there's going to be a level of procrastination, and there's going to be a lack of thinking like an entrepreneur. And so by the time most likely you get to this level, you are probably near 30. And so, to then at that time say, you know what, I'm wrapping things up, and now you're going to take this lane of an entrepreneur, and now you're going to have to wrap your head around these things to be this disciplined, organized person out of nowhere. That's going to be more challenging, and you're going to be slower at getting there, versus someone who, during high school, they've always been this kind of charismatic person, and they're smart, and they're well spoken, and they're very social, and they're always doing these things. And then right after high school they go to college, or right after high school they're not someone that drinks, and they're not someone that is just chilling out all the time. They're someone that's just moving on the clock and being this person, well, then that person is just going to be a different person. I mean, it's just two different lives, two different experiences. And so that person is sharp, that person is just moving, and then they make these things happen. Because what they're concentrating on is they're just, by natural means, they're just having fun, getting involved, and making things happen. And so another question you might be wondering is, well, how difficult are these things, and how difficult could these people find what they're doing? And that's another thing. Like I said earlier, not everyone is mentally capable and have that capability. I mean, who knows? It could just be that maybe all they're doing is challenging and difficult, but to them they are so interested, and they don't really chill out much, and so they're just about grinding, and they're all about the journey of the ride for that thing. And so to them it's all a journey, a ride. It's like their Disneyland, to just be deeply involved and do these things. And that's their path. And so the other person that isn't like that, well, they're going to be doing something different. They're going to be having different ventures, different experiences, obviously. And if that person is, they're not someone that's good at public speaking, and, they're not really businessy, and, they're not thinking rocket science, and they're not thinking about, huge $1 million corporations, then obviously that person is going to have a different path. And, and so either way, for someone who naturally is just working and, they're just doing their thing, and they want to do something different at some point in their life, which is a common natural thing, then that person would have to literally train themselves to be that person that flies through things. Isn't that crazy? And the reason I say that is because when you're going to be doing something for yourself, like that's on the businessy side and entrepreneurial side, blah, 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 you really have to be a person that is about this now. And so that is a completely different thing. It's now something new to understand, something new to worry about. And it is a completely new learning curve. And so think about that. Because that person wasn't mentally capable for this versus the other person, that person who's starting now, who's just trying to do something different for themselves, are pretty much playing catch up to the person who, by natural means, has always just been that person that's interested, and, they don't find these things difficult. And they've kind of always been on this businessy side of things. They've always been about the technical things, and they have a technical mind. And so that's what the person would need to be doing if they're going to be starting at some point later. They're going to have to be playing catch up to the person that naturally their mind understands it easily. Because now you're going to have to be training yourself. You're going to have to be learning. You're going to have to be looking into stuff. You're going to have to be learning what stuff means. You're going to have to be taking notes down. You're going to have to be probably calling a few resource spots. You're going to have to be literally investigating what one thing does versus another for your needs. You're going to have to be breaking things down. You're going to have to be networking and literally have a structure going, a project going. And, that takes a lot. That takes a lot mentally, for being someone that is, at some point later deciding to make a transition in their lives. That's a lot to deal with. And so, if you've just been that person that is, finally wants to do something different and never been wired like that, it's going to be challenging. You're going to have to literally get yourself to finally get your act together and really, really intensely focus on this. And so, as far as procrastination goes, I personally think everybody procrastinates. It's just that the only difference is that, the person that is mentally flying through things because, they find these things easy, when they procrastinate, they get back on the ball because that's all they're about. So they're able to afford to procrastinate. It's just that when they're done procrastinating, all they ever do is how they are as a person. Their character is still interested in these things. They're getting involved with people publicly. And so there's that versus the other person who isn't that sharp person who, has always been about this stuff. They are going to have to just train themselves to get there. And so it's a completely different experience. The person procrastinating is going to have to, overall, they're just not going to have a plan. They're not having an idea yet. So for them, they're just, balancing work with figuring out what to do and learning these things because, they never done this before. They never been interested in business. They never thought about it. It's just now that they came up with this idea that seems interesting. And now they're trying to take this interesting idea because there is the interest. There it is right there. They came up with something. But now they have to make this transition to being this person that is sharp and it's all about this. And it's not easy to do that. It would have been better off for that person if they just would have always been that person since after graduating high school, since high school, just having this mentally inclined mind and, they are very social, they crack jokes in front of everybody and, they're able to be funny and, they're always getting involved and asking questions and setting these things up and doing these, colleague programs. And so it's a different experience. They would have just been most likely an entrepreneur in their early 20s and had stuff going at an early age. Or even earlier, they could have been having some sort of online business during high school because their mind was technically inclined to understand e-commerce. And, they put things together. And now this teenager is selling online successfully with a brand. And they're making great money at an early age. And so that's their natural benefit. Because that's just who they are. That's how that teenager is mentally wired for that situation. So for someone who later on in their late 20s wants to start doing that, after all their life experiences and working and, and never been mentally inclined for this, it would be it's going to be a little more difficult, because they're going to have to finally come up with an idea and then figure out a way to nourish that idea, versus someone who came across these things, always been interested, and they figured out everything on the fly and everything was just easy. And so they flew through that. They found that lane for that situation easy. You know, they found understanding the website easy. They found the learning curve to the website, and learning how to make things happen was easy. You know, they didn't struggle much in understanding how to make it work. You know, they understood a lot how to make it happen. And so to them, they were just constantly connecting the dots from one point to the other, and it was easy. So for you to be starting this way later in your life, you're going to have to, first, you're going to have a good idea come to your mind. And, you know, that's another thing too, is for a good idea to come, you just don't know when that idea will finally arrive. You could be thinking right now all day what to possibly come up with to do, and may not have an idea. And so you're just living your life with no idea in mind. And let's say several years later, or maybe a year later, an idea comes to mind without you thinking about what idea to come to mind. It just came to mind, and now you're motivated to do this. Because you can't really do much without a good idea. You know what I'm saying? So it's not easy trying to come up with a good idea either. I mean, especially when you're trying to make something work. So there's a lot of factors involved that people don't realize. And what I'm basically saying is it is very challenging. It is very hard to make these transitions and be this entrepreneur that's making things happen. And it's because of that learning curve difference, because of how the mind is wired differently, and also the different life experiences and time and place. A lot of people that are, you know, successful in the entrepreneurial field, I don't think they realize that people aren't mentally wired like them. They don't realize that mentally they have a gift over others. That's something I don't think they realize. And so, you know, they could just be paraphrasing their own mental quotes for how to be successful, but that person is just not mentally inclined. They're finding these things difficult. You know, they may not be computer savvy. You know, maybe because it's just going to feel like school all over again. You know, with getting a handle on these things, it's going to feel like school. Like, you know, when you're in class and there's this new project, new segment you got to learn, and you're going to realize that it's a different learning curve for every person. You know, some people are going to be struggling, some people are going to be slower than others, some people are not going to understand it at all. Some people are going to just quit on it and just be like, I don't understand this. And then there's going to be the people that, you know, are struggling, you know, they don't understand it, but then slowly they at least can get a few problems done and they can at least get a C minus, you know. But the person that is just flying through it, it's just more easy for them. So it's going to feel like school when you are someone that's making these transitions to do these entrepreneurial things. You know, and it's not going to be easy because now it's just you. You're not going to a class. It's just you manually out in the world trying to put pieces together to make it happen. And that's not easy at all. So yeah, what I'm basically saying is that it is extremely hard to do these types of things. And I don't think successful entrepreneurs realize that amongst other people, that not everyone is them. Not everyone had that eureka moment that they found and they fell in love with and they kept going with, and however they found those that financial gain. There's also that story. And so they don't realize that a lot of people they don't have that same situation as them. And it is a completely different experience. So for you to start something right now, it's going to take a lot of work. You're going to have to literally train yourself to do these technical things that require a lot of energy and focus. And you're going to have to be someone that literally ends up learning and knowing about all this stuff. You're going to learn about, what this does. You're going to learn about what certain words mean now. And you're literally going to get into this whole mode of this. And that's another thing I wanted to talk about, is how manual life is and how we're left in the world, in the open world with no instructions. There is no instructions, like literally for things to follow your dreams. You go to school, you finish that, and, there's college that is out there. There's that option, and then there is just working. And then, after that, there's pretty much it. And so you want to make more money, you have to figure out how to do that on your own. It's not like the government helps you come up with an idea. So everyone's out here, without an idea, and everyone is dealing with different stresses. Everyone's in different spots, situations. Maybe they got kids, blah, blah, blah. And so it's not easy to wrap your head around learning all these things and suddenly becoming this brainiac that makes good money doing their own thing. It's not easy at all. This is a big learning curve to doing these things. And so you shouldn't have to worry about the fact that you don't have an idea at this moment. Because that's what it's actually going to take to flourish with something. You need to have a eureka light bulb idea that comes to mind that you could work with. You start stretching things out and you start layering more to it until it starts becoming something. And that's pretty much the point, is that, if you're ever wondering how people get there at these high stages of their lives, it is because of that. It has to be because of that. I'm just going to say that it is because of that. And it just makes sense. It just makes sense. I mean, just think about it, how quickly people are doing things. I mean, you have to be mentally into that. You have to be mentally able to take risk with money you probably can't afford. So think about that. There's also people that would take risks and take out a loan that is way out of their pay range, and they're going to go out there and do their thing. And that's very risky. I mean, if you don't have money, you're not even earning that, and you start taking out a loan that's way above your pay grade, that's going to be, that is that person. That person is that person to do that. And so they may break the ice with their idea and the risk and do well with it. But another person, they're not thinking like that. And it's not that they're not bold or brave, but think about it like this. The other person that's not doing that, they're smart also, because the way they're thinking is, if this loan is way above my pay grade and I'm not sure how this is going to turn out, they're thinking smart. They're thinking, what, based on my options and how I looked at things, this doesn't even seem like a good idea or efficient. And so they're not going to take the route in getting into debt. And so they're going to try to figure out something else. And sure, that person who took the risk may somewhat be getting there and be in a little bit of debt. But this person over here is not going to take this kind of risky moment right now. And so they're going to be doing something later. And so you see what I mean? There's a person who took the fast route. And then there's the person who considered options and said, no, not now. And so that was put to the side. So you see how people play different cards. You realize, do you understand now how, some things move based on the cards you have and your situation. And also, these cards tend to be based on personality and character and who you are. Because you may have these cards, but your personality and who you are and your mind may not take this card to put down, because to you this doesn't seem like good, but to the other person it seems like this is something they take. So that person that would take it to say, and they become successful and tell the other person, well, you just need to be a risk taker, blah, blah, blah. That person may not realize that they took that risk, but they also ended up being someone, either way, they were someone who had that kind of mental capability. Because they're obviously a different person. And that's the main point that I want to make, is that they're obviously a different person. And so to anyone who suddenly wants to become a risk taker and take these kind of crazy risks with the money like that, that person would have to be that person. And so, if they're not that person, they're going to do that. Because if you're going to take that risky route, you're going to have to be someone that's already been a person that is mentally inclined, and you're all about this. And either way, like before I was saying, they're this person that find these things easy, and they've got things figured out already. So they take these risks with all these strategic plans in place. You know what I'm saying? And so either way, they're going to be the ones that are flying, versus the other person who, thinks a little differently, doesn't think that it's a worthwhile risk. They're going to seek other things. And so they're going to just be waiting until they come up with just the right thing, just like the other person. to try to fly with it. And one of the biggest drawbacks that creates a delay in success to try to do this is the fact that it could take a while to come up with something, and then it would take a while to get something going, and then it would take a while to balance these things and get it going even more. You see what I mean? So this is what creates the differences on who's an entrepreneur, who is not, and who's one more sooner than the other in the world. It's just that simple fact that there are people that are just obviously different. And so they're obviously different in doing it faster than the person that is going to be the person that is going to try to catch up to the person that is a little more quicker. And the person that's already always been about this. You know, because it's going to be more challenging to get there faster over someone who is all about this, always been involved, always been about this, and they're making it happen. You know, competition-wise, that person is going to be winning. And I don't think that person realized, like I was saying earlier, these entrepreneurs, I don't think realize that they have some sort of gift on them. You know, they have that motivation, they have that ability to not find these things difficult. You know, they're not looking at the abundance of work it's going to take and mental, technical contribution that is going to take. They're not looking at it as difficult. They're not looking at it as a lot to read. And so, you know, for a person that's not like that, it's going to take training to get them up to speed. But they're going to need training that mainly has to do with getting their mind to be that mind that by natural means does these things easily. And I don't think that's easy to do either way. Because that person is not that person. They're a completely different person. And so, for example, you know, what are the odds that someone out the blue now, whoever's listening to this, who has no interest in NASA and rocket science, to suddenly now say, you know what, even though you never even had any interest in space and whatever, now you're just randomly saying, well, I want to join NASA and I want to, you know, do the courses and blah, blah, and try to see if you can start working there. It's not going to make sense. And you're going to obviously struggle. And the only possible way you may not is if you're some sort of superhuman genius that at any given moment in time and in their life period can make these wild transitions to go from, you know, someone who is, you know, working at a job, suddenly make the transition to, you know, being a cop, to then suddenly make the transition to join the army, to then suddenly making transition to, you know, doing other difficult things, and then suddenly make a transition to go to NASA and be an astronaut. I mean, you'd have to be a completely genius and probably superhuman brain. Your brain at that point must be working at 100% capacity, and you should probably be studied. But, you know, the point I'm trying to say is, it's just obvious that the person who understands things easier is going to be the one that statistically are going to be the ones that have these things going more sooner and are and amongst other people are succeeding bigger. And so if you were to trade minds with the other person, literally that person would do the same thing. And so that would be an advantage for them if somehow, you would give a piece of that mind to the other person, which is impossible right now. I don't think it's ever would be possible. It's just, that's what it would take. And so, as far as feeling discouraged about where you are at, you shouldn't feel discouraged, because the truth is, it's very difficult out here for everybody. It's extremely difficult to come up with an idea and make it a big scale thing. It's not easy to do that. And there's a lot to deal with in life. I mean, you got to deal with so much. You got to deal with 401k. You got to deal with, subscription. You got to deal with different kinds of bills. You got to deal with maintenance on your car. Feed your pet if you got one, and do maintenance on your pet. I mean, there's just a lot of things to deal with. And so, you shouldn't feel so down on yourself if you're not making things happen like other people, because you're not them. And so you have to figure out a way to do something for yourself that's convenient and has an easy learning curve, and come up with an idea that you find really interesting and that you really, really like enough to bring how difficult things would be down a little bit. Because that's what I think what makes things more easier is when you like something a lot, to do it, and you feel passionate about it, and you also think this is a really, really awesome, sweet spot idea, that's when I think the difficulty of it goes down. So you don't find it challenging, and you're going to start flying through it. That's what I think you have to do. And you just have to realize that you're not the other people. And so you can't be comparing yourself to that person, because that person already did that. That person had their life experience. They're just talking about it now. And so, as far as building a multi-million-dollar corporation and how they did that, I mean, however they did that. But you have to think about what you could do now at your scale for your own self. And so finding something convenient, easy, and that you really like, and mainly has to be a great idea, that's what you have to focus on. And then you focus on that, and then it starts growing, and then you can worry about other things later. And then soon later, maybe in the future, you're going to end up having some sort of $1 million business. And then maybe you get better at it and have another one. Then you can end up having a multi-million-dollar linked up corporation. And that's how you ended up doing. And then you would have a story to talk about. And that cycle will just keep going, because let's say you finally make it, and you did what you had to do. Now the people asking you how you did all this stuff, they're looking at you, finding all this stuff difficult, and everyone is trying to, be you now, and they want to know that, but what they don't realize is that they're not you. And so you could just talk about your stories. It could be inspiring, could be interesting to hear about, but they're still not you. And so all they can have is a great story in their mind and the inspiration, but you still need a good idea. And, once again, they're not that person. You're not them. So either way, at that point, the best thing to do would be the same thing the other person did, was find something that's easy, that you like, that's a great idea, that's a sweet spot idea, and you have to nourish it. You know what I'm saying? And so that cycle will always be there, in my opinion. The cycle of people wondering how you did it, and just looking at how big scale things are and not realizing that they shouldn't be worrying about that. You should be worrying about what you could do for your time, because that's what matters more. And so you have to figure out your own learning curve to your own thing, and literally have your own ecosystem of a process and style going that you can have for yourself, and literally focus on that. Because with whatever it is that you do, once you start jumping a few hurdles and you have something more than nothing going, from the other end, from the outside looking in, that same cycle is going to be there of people wondering how you do it, and they're going to be finding things difficult. They're going to be like, oh man, you're so technical dealing with this and doing that, how do you do it? But what they don't realize is that they're not you. And so, and as far as interest goes and just being so into it, you're not finding these things difficult. And so it's in their best interest, once again, it's in everyone's best interest in that situation to, instead of figuring out how can you be at that big level, you have to figure out what you can do at the smallest level for yourself. But you first need a great sweet spot idea, because without that, there isn't anything. You cannot do anything without an idea. And so that would be what it would take. And yeah, you shouldn't feel discouraged about what you don't have at this time, and shouldn't feel discouraged about the end product being so high scaled and making multi-million dollars, because that's a very big, ambitious, huge goal, and that is supreme success at that level. And so when you're doing that, thinking like that, you are heightening the difficulty, and you are like redlining the difficulty. And so that alone could stump you from pursuing these things. And so if you have a good idea, that's a sweet spot idea that you are so passionate about, that you're rubbing your hands on, and you're just like, man, this is just a sweet spot idea. That's when all the process involved and all the crap you're gonna have to deal with is gonna not look difficult. All the hurdles that would typically be high would actually be small hurdles. And that is, at that point, your best advantage. Little do you know, that's your best advantage. When it's something you really like, all the hurdles feel small, you're dealing with a bunch of crap that have to do with it, that go with it, to go together, and you're flying through it. So you see how, once again, everything I'm explaining goes back to what I was saying about how it's just two different people. One's just really interested, always been about this stuff. So they're going to be doing this avenue, taking this lane, and that's going to be how they end up being born into being the entrepreneur that you would typically see. It's stuff like that. And so it's a repeated cycle, I've realized. It's a repeated cycle that only makes sense. And like I said earlier, it is extremely difficult. You have to get your head wrapped around that reality. It is extremely difficult. And so when there's people doing all these huge things and working fast, and you feel like they're like some sort of machine of making stuff happen and you don't know how they do it, just think about the fact that they are a very different person. A very different person, and their brain is what it is. They're able to do this, they're able to do that, they find it easy, they're moving quick. That's them. And so, if anything, just be inspired by that. But just realize you can't be them. You can't be someone that suddenly like them, especially overnight. So that's what I'm saying. It's in your best interest to not worry about being them. They may be cool, they may be awesome, they may be inspiring, but you need to be yourself and figure out something for yourself, because at this point, it's about what you can do for yourself. Look at all the inspirations you want, store in your mind all the inspirational stories you want, but you have to focus on having your own thing and have something awesome to work with. And not worry about the scalability so much. You just need to have something going, and you need to train yourself to be about it. And then you have to also keep your motivation and energy high all the time. And that is how, in my opinion, how you start making breakthroughs. You start making breakthroughs with having something you enjoy, learning so much about it, being all about it, eat, sleep, because you're so excited about it that you do more, and then you do more, and you start layering, you start making it better, you start making it look cooler, to the point where you have this cool thing with a lot of substance. And then that's when you have something. So yeah, that's just what I think entrepreneurs typically would miss out on, is that reality that I was explaining. How people are just different. People are different, and everyone procrastinates. It's just that the wiring and what you're doing and just the type of things you're getting yourself into, it could just be very different personality-wise versus what another person would be into. Not everyone is businessy. Not everyone is that kind of person that wants to wear these Rolex watches with their suits and, dress pants and dress shoes, with their nice cologne and gelled up hair. Not everyone is that kind of person to be in that kind of setting. And so I don't think you can necessarily mold an entrepreneur like that either, especially if you've never been into the entrepreneurial spirit. To suddenly be into the entrepreneurial spirit, you have to be someone that comes to senses to tell yourself you want to do something different. And now you're going to start getting into the entrepreneurial spirit, and now things start taking off because it's happening now. And if this would have happened earlier, many years earlier, then that would have happened then. And by natural means, whether it happened then or now, it's still a natural means situation, because by nature, with your life and situation, you're dealing with what you're dealing with, and you're part of life in society. And so if it would have happened, if you would have figured things out and made things happen and been this person earlier, that would have actually been an advantage, believe it or not. But that would have been for a different dimension in time. That time it's over. You're here now. And so if you do it now, then by natural means anyways, it would be the natural time for you. You see what I'm saying? There's like a natural timing to things too. If we're talking about nature and we're talking about biology and ecosystem, and we're talking about the fact that there's billions of people on this planet, and everyone's different, time, setting, energy, whether or not something happens now or later, it's just you're gonna have to deal with that. You're gonna have to deal with the fact that you came up with an idea now years later versus years ago. And you could be saying now, well, if I would have came up with this idea years ago, I would have just been flying. I would have been better off. Well, obviously. But it's just the fact that with your life, personally, now is when you came up with it. And so now is when you're starting to do stuff. You never had the idea until now. And so that means that now you're going to start being this person that is all about this, while someone else years ago, who has always been this person, been about this, they just did it earlier. So, if you're ever wondering how some people are successful more sooner than others, it mainly has to do with that fact that everyone's different and everyone's in a different time and place. And so you just have to accept that reality with your life and just go with the fact that you are who you are now. And if you're figuring stuff out now for you now, then that's okay. You can't blame yourself for not being able to come up with that eureka light bulb idea years ago. You can't blame yourself because you didn't come up with that years ago. It's not your fault. It's not your fault that you didn't have this great idea till now. And it just goes to show that that's what it tends to take, is that good idea. That good idea, because you thinking to yourself, man, if only I would have done this years ago. Well, duh, it's because it's a great idea. And it's so good that you're saying that. So either way, with that situation, it just further proves and adds to what I was explaining earlier, is that everyone's different, and some people are just mentally wired differently because people are obviously different. So yeah, that's the topic of the day for the podcast. I thought it was going to be short, but it ended up being a little longer than expected, which is fine. But yeah, that's what I wanted to talk about. Hopefully you understand. And it's just me explaining what I think entrepreneurs don't realize. Those that are coaching and acting like people aren't into being successful and coming up with something, and thinking that, that people are lazy because they're not a businessy entrepreneurial person yet. And because you can't expect everyone to be like that. You know what I'm saying? And there's a learning curve to suddenly want to be that. And suddenly have all these things going. There's a learning curve to it. And you have to find that energy and motivation. And you have to mentally become almost a little bit of a different person. So it's not easy to just jump on board and become an entrepreneur, especially if you've never been mentally inclined for it. You never had the entrepreneurial spirit. And it's only now when you just suddenly want to get into the entrepreneurial spirit and try to break into the market. And so, that's what the podcast was about. Hopefully people understood what I explained. Hopefully it helps. Hopefully it opened some eyes. Hopefully it made sense more than anything. But the biggest takeaway to all this is, if there were to be a moral to it, is that you shouldn't feel so discouraged about your place and timing. You just have to work with what you got. And if it's now that you have a great idea and it's now that it's the time and you're doing it, then it's now's the time. And then you just work with that. And don't worry so much about the other person's situation. Yeah, their story could be interesting, but don't get so wrapped up into it, because they obviously had a different lifestyle and path. They're that human being for themselves. And so you just need to do your own thing for yourself. And that's how you can have the difficulties of things be more lowered for yourself, because you're not looking at them and trying to do all this complicated, interconnected stuff. You're going to be doing stuff that is for you, for your time and place and your situation. And that's how you can end up making a breakthrough. And just being original and doing things according to your own mind and yourself. And so that's the biggest moral to it all. So that's the end of the podcast. Stay tuned for more different types of topics. Most topics come up just me thinking, or just randomly in the day, a thought comes across. It could have been based off something. It could have just been out of pure thought. And I just think, you know what? Let me elaborate on this. And this topic is what I ended up making it. This is what I ended up coming up with and elaborated on. So stay tuned for more. And that's the end of the podcast. Goodbye.